video covers the easiest way to take written sheet music and know exactly which note to play on the keyboard.
One of which?
Exactly.
So often students are like, that's a C. But when I ask them which C, which B is that on the keyboard, that's when they start to have more trouble.
I'm in trouble.
So if you do a lot of this when you're reading your sheet music and you know the note, but you don't know how to find it on the keyboard quickly and efficiently, this video is for you.
I made it just for you.
The keyboard is 88 keys. That is a lot of real estate to take up.
It's so big!
Fortunately, it is in a repeating pattern, which is how we identify which notes we're playing. But what most students are missing is a correlation between that repeating pattern on the keyboard and the repeating pattern that we see in sheet music. So when I was a kid, there was this game called Battleship. It's pretty basic. You just have like a little board in front of you, and then you have to say a point on a graph. And if the other person's ship was on that point, you say, oh, you hit my battleship.
Against the computer or opponent, your mission, sink the enemy's fleet.
Battleship sunk. Battleship sunk.
I think in the 90s, kids were more easily entertained than kids today. But I say that because understanding a basic grid, like in the game Battleship, is all you need to know to take written sheet music to the keyboard. Written sheet music is also written on a grid. We have an X and a Y plot. We have sheet music with the lines and spaces going this way, and then we have the placement of the pitches going this way. So we have X and Y.
First, we make a graph.
Now, if you take a look at a grand staff, this is still a lot of points on the graph. So how do we make this easier? Well, just like ancient explorers times long ago had the North Star, they knew this was north, this is the direction we need to go. We need a North Star. We need our first defining point on our graph to understand its placement and relationship to the keyboard. So our North Star is going to be what should have been the first letter that you learned on the piano, middle C. So let's find its placement on the grand staff. Middle C is in between the treble clef and the bass clef, which is why it gets its name. When we look at each stave individually, the treble clef, for instance, the middle C is the ledger line below the treble clef, and then when we look at the bass clef on its own, the middle C is the ledger line above the bass clef. And when we put our grand staff together, it's like that invisible 11th line there where the middle C goes. And this is important. It's our North Star because we are going to refer to pitches and their relationship to this middle C. So let's try that real quick. If we have a middle C, where is the F above middle C going to be? Remember the way that our y-axis, right, up and down works. It's just going to be the F above that C. So all we have to do is count from C, start on the C, we go to D, the next line is gonna be an E, and then the space above that is F. This is the F above middle C. So you know it's not just any F on the keyboard, because there's quite a few, it is the F above middle C. And you can do the same thing going down. Let's say we're on the bass clef, we're starting with middle C. Where is the G below middle C? So you start with your middle C and you just count backwards, right? So you go C to B to A, and then you see that top space on the treble clef is our G, not just any G, but the G below middle C. Now we're gonna fill out more points on our staves so that we have better understanding of where we're at on the keyboard, because we start with middle C, but what if we're like 3 C's above that, 2 C's above that? It's not gonna be as helpful. So we need to fill in where those C's go. So we're gonna start with the treble clef. The next C above middle C is the third space on the treble clef. We call this treble C because it is written on the treble clef. It's right in the middle there. So treble C. And it's the same thing that we did with middle C. Refer to pitches and the relationship above or below that C. So if something's close to this note, you think, oh, this is the E above treble C. And you know exactly where that's gonna be on the piano. Now the next C we call high C because it's really high on the treble clef. So it is the second ledger line above the treble clef. That is high C. And the same thing, right? Refer to pitches above and below. So if we want to find the A below high C, just go down 2 pitches. That first ledger line is the A above high C, and you should know exactly where that is on the keyboard. So if we look at our treble clef, we have the 3 C's, right? So middle C, treble C, and high C. Remember these 3 notes. Memorize them, write them on your hand, tattoo it on your forehead, look in a mirror whenever you need help, whatever you need to do. Memorize these 3 notes, and all the other pitches in between, you will be able to instantly find. So now we're gonna do the same thing for the bass clef. So if we start with the middle C on our bass clef, and we go the C below, if the treble C is the C written on the treble clef, then bass C is gonna be the C written on the bass clef. So if we look at the second space on our bass clef, that is bass C. Pretty simple. Make sure that you can see the relationship on the staff to the keyboard. So as we're going through these, look at your keyboard. Here's middle C. You're gonna go a C below, that's gonna be bass C. Oh, if I go a C above, that's gonna be treble C. So back to where we were, bass C. Now we have one more point on our graph to add, and that is low C. So if you go 2 ledger lines below the bass clef, you get low C. So the 3 C's on our bass clef, we start with our middle C, then we have our bass C. It's called bass C because it's written on the bass clef, you got that. And then the low C, which is below the bass clef. Memorize these 3 notes, and you will know not just note names, but where they go on the keyboard. And that's the point, taking the sheet music to your fingers, right? Now, how to use this in practice. The easiest way to do this, talk it out. Whether it's with your teacher, whether it's by yourself, your little brother, your potted plant, whatever it may be, talk it out. So don't just tell yourself, oh, I'm playing a B here. This is the B below middle C, and then you find the spot on the keyboard. Keep doing that whenever you're confused about where to put your hand, and you will eventually form the relationship between the grid on the sheet music and the grid on the keyboard. The little dots correlate to specific keys.
These dots are itchy.
And if you have your North Star and then the other points above and below that, it's much easier to fill in those points. Lastly, repetition is key.
The key.
Just go through the steps in the video and make sure you have each one memorized. So the first thing we did, we went over all of the C's. Make sure you know your C's. There's only 5 of them, right? We have high C, treble C, middle C, bass C, and low C. And yes, if you want to be super smart about it, there are other C's on the piano.
Shouldn't be a know-it-all.
You never really see those in written music. We use these things called AVA markers. It's a whole thing, probably another video for you. Long story short, know your 5 C's and where they go on the grand staff. Memorize their names, memorize their places. These are the points on the graph that you use to figure out where all the other notes go. And then the second step is talking out the notes as you're reading. So when you're learning a song,
Talk to me.
oh, this is the B below treble C. This is the E above bass C, so on and so forth. Talk out those relationships. You will see them, you will hear them. It will be much clearer and just go along much faster if you can talk it out. And then thirdly, practice sight reading. So what does that mean? Sight reading just means that you look at music for the first time, never having looked at it, never having played it, and just give it a shot. The most important thing about sight reading is that it's easy.
Easy does it.
So if you're a very beginner, first-time pianist, and you're like, well, all written music is hard, you can find things to sight read. It could literally just be C's and then a D where you're like, middle C, and then the D above middle C and then back to C. That's fine. We all start somewhere. I took so much joy in putting this video together because I used to be terrible.
Terrible.
At sight reading. Like, not just bad, like terrible. Not just even when I was like a kid or something like that. I mean, when I was a kid in my piano lessons, I would just kind of memorize the music. The teacher would ask me to play from the middle and I just like give them this look like, okay.
Help me.
It was a mess, right? I never really engaged in the reading process. And it really held me back as a musician, even when, oh my gosh, I had an audition for Berklee College of Music, and it was probably the worst audition of my life, but for many other reasons. But one portion, the sight reading, the examiner just had to keep taking like music off the piano and giving me an easier version of something to play because I was literally like, I have no idea what to do. What do I do? And even when I was in college, I got accepted to college for music despite my sight reading because I could play all right. And then, oh my gosh, there would be times that the professor would say, oh, can someone come up to the board and play this example in harmony class or music history class? I would pretend to be sick. I'd say, oh, I forgot my glasses. Don't wear glasses. Like myriad of excuses just to not read music.
Pretty sad, really.
So I say all this to say, if I can learn to sight read, you definitely can too. All it takes is using the approach of the C's, talking it out, and sight reading practice. And it's really interesting, over the course of a few years, I got much better at sight reading. And now, after teaching for like the last decade, I would say my music reading is probably one of my stronger skills as a musician.
You gotta love a happy ending.
So all it does is take some practice. And you get to skip all the tears and frustration and questioning of your life choices that I had to go through trying to read music because I gave you the winning formula. All right, that is it for my Learn How to Read Sheet Music Better video. I really hope you liked it and that you got some good stuff to make your life a little bit easier traversing written music. As always, let me know what you thought. Like, comment, subscribe, tell me some of the sight reading stuff that you do, or maybe you have other embarrassing sight reading stories, because trust me, that's just the tip of the iceberg. I got plenty more. And if you appreciate what the channel does, definitely check out thepowerfulpiano.com. We've got a bunch of sick merch, shirts, hoodies, tanks, tees, all that good stuff. So, as always, good luck with your practice and stay powerful, y'all.